to the presentation of Brandon's Senior Research Project. This is a day I've been anticipating for a long time, with mostly high expectations and calm feelings, a little bit of trepidation. I realized something just the other day, that so many of conversations that Brandon and I have had over the last 2 years have begun with the words, "I have an idea." Brandon saying, "I have an idea." And I realized we haven't had one of those conversations for a while now, and I think part of it is because he's actually doing one of his ideas. And I just want to commend him from the outset for the initiative he has taken in conceiving the idea and in taking the many steps, which he'll outline for you, in bringing the idea to fruition. And so I'm really pleased. I'm not going to take any more time. You know Brandon. And so I want to leave him all the time that I can for his presentation, and I just welcome you up.
Thank you.
And just turn it over. I invite you to listen carefully and track some things that you'd like to ask questions on. I know that he's intentionally keeping some aspects of it brief in hopes that you'll ask him questions so that he has a little bit more time to expand. Okay.
Thank you. So, thanks for coming out. Big day, and also waiting for this day for a long time. And about the ideas, and I am definitely an idea man, so the good thing about having lots and lots of ideas, that if you have 10 ideas and 9 of them are terrible, you still have one good idea. So never be reluctant to voice an idea, because if you have enough of them, at least 1 or 2 of them are going to be not terrible. So that's my philosophy of life. Ideas are free. They're totally free. So most of you know what I've been up to, right? There's nobody that's completely in the dark about what I've been up to. I've been going to Milltown Elementary School down the road here and doing what originally was supposed to be a senior research project, but today we will not call it that, because when you're doing research at a university and you're doing that research on people, you need to go through an ethics board, and you need to go through all these different steps that was beyond the scope of an undergraduate senior research project. So it wasn't a research project where I'm studying human beings. Okay, so that's very important to know that it's not like that. What it was, if it's not a senior research project, then what is it? At the end of the day, you could call it an intervention on some kids who needed behavioral changes. So I'm an experienced teacher. I have licensing, and I have education and experience in teaching. So it wasn't that hard to just say, okay, this isn't a senior research project. This is a intervention. I'm getting a job helping boys who have trouble behaving in the classroom behave better in the classroom. And that's what it is. So I still had to do a lot of research, but I just couldn't do it on children. So I did have to read a lot of books and do papers and lit reviews and all kinds of things that are academically based in research, but just I didn't collect a lot of data on the kids because that crosses an ethical boundary. So, all right, PALS program. It is the Physical Activity Learning Student Program. That's what PALS means. I needed the name to be something that I could call a kid. Like, he is my pal. He is my physical activity learner, right? So I was trying to come up with a name, Buddy, or I don't know, I was struggling. And then I was walking around, as I do, and I dropped by the Petersons to grab Santy, because why walk if you're not going to take a dog? So I grabbed the dog, and he was, dragging or going ahead or doing whatever. I said, "Come on, pal." And then I just said, "Oh, wait a minute." And then I said, "Activity." learning students, and I just jumped for joy, and Sandy was, so that's how the pals word came to be. It was all due to Sandy. Yeah. Okay, so I've been to a couple of these readings, and they talk about why they do it, how they came to it, because a lot of theses, but this is not, although it's like 50 pages. They start at one thing, and they end up at something completely different. And that is definitely the case with this. I started wanting to do a thesis, kind of pushing back against all of this rhetoric about white men and how they're the plague on the earth, and how that was being, that was part of university. That was part of the classrooms that I was attending here, the dining room, a lot of conversations, and I was really getting sick of it. And I saw people up here saying, white men, white men, white men, and I'm like, okay, let's have an alternative view. I'm sure it's not all wrong, but let's at least look at the other side and see what virtues there might be in men, which there are a lot of, as it turns out. So I went to Lois, and I said, Lois, I'm sick of this garbage. I'm going to do a thesis and push back. And she says, so you're sick of people waving their hand in the air and blaming people and victimizing and victimizer and all this stuff. And I'm like, yes. And she's like, so how are you going to do that? I said, I'm going to get up here and I'm going to wave my finger around. So that's why Lois and I have such a great relationship, because she is not afraid to push back at me, because I push a lot, and she's willing to push back, and that's why we get along so well. So, she's like, so what, you're gonna do the exact thing you don't like? You're gonna do the exact thing you're criticizing? And I said, no. So what are you gonna do? How are you gonna help the people that you perceive need help? And in my perception, it was men that needed help, because there's 1,001 programs to help all these young women, which need help. But there's also these guys, these young guys, and 20-year-old guys, and 30-year-old guys, 50-year-old guys, and they all have all these problems, but there's not as many established programs to help. So I wanted to start one, right? So I'm like, okay, thesis is out, what do I do? So what I did was I called up Mark, and we went to his place, as we tended to do, and we just sat there with a glass of whiskey or two and brainstorm. That's what you do, is you get together, have a couple drinks, and say, how are we going to attack this problem in a service way, not just talking. Talking's too cheap. We need to, how am I going to get in and make change in people's lives, okay? So, we're throwing things around, and after a few, he said, okay, we kind of brainstormed the idea of working out and all this stuff, and going and starting relationships with these young guys, and giving them a stable male role model to look up to. And so he said, okay, go home, sleep it off, and write a one-pager, like a proposal. So if you're a young student, you need to get used to writing one-pagers, just a nice, easy proposal, because it's a good way to get your idea across real quick, because people are busy. So I brought it back. He said, oh, there's definitely someone in society who will support this. So then he said, take this one-pager and write like a 5-page proposal with benefits, costs, like you name it. This had to be absolutely pro. And I learned that in NGO class with like making a PMER. I don't even know what that means. Sarah?
Project management, evaluation, report, review.
Right, okay, so I wrote one of those, just to get this off the ground. And he said, okay, this is great. So we had to look, no, I'm not gonna get there. Okay, so my senior research project was 2 terms. Usually they're 1 term, and this one was 2 terms, because it took so much work to get it going, just to plan this thing. I had to write the proposal, I had to get funding, because I go there every day from 7:30 to 10. So my alarm goes off at 6:45, and I get back to school at 5 after 10. And you might say, hey, a virtuous person would do that for free. And I'm not that virtuous. It's hard getting up at 6:45 every day to deal with kids that have discipline problems and going in and working out. Like, it's a workout. I'm working out with them. And I know you're thinking, hey, if this guy's working out every day, why didn't he lose some freaking weight? I'm just kidding. Little joke. No, I'm just fun. Okay. Yes, so it is tiring, and it was important that I got paid and was motivated to get up and go every day. And when you do get paid, volunteers can do so much, but if you want to really dig in and make a change, you need someone on the ground with invested time and is accountable to their investors, right? So eventually we got set up with we applied to a couple different foundations, and a couple of them said, forget it. And one, the United Way, they were like, yes, we do see that there is a problem with young men, because on the numbers in New Brunswick alone, just New Brunswick, they're not going to school, they're disengaged from the workplace, they're not getting married, they're killing themselves, literally. They're choosing death over life because their lives are so terrible, they have so little meaning that they're saying, you know what, I'm going to do society a favor and take myself out of the pool because I'm just draining the resources, which is why a lot of guys do that. So I said, okay, those are the people I want to help. I want to stop that kind of stuff. So how do you do that? I had to read a lot of books to do this, to set up. So okay, let's talk about term one. Term one, I had to get funding, which was difficult. Like, it's a lot of work to just go to meetings and get funding and do all that. And then I had to write what I call the playbook. The playbook is things to do with the kids. Things to do with the kids that simulate what they were getting in the past, and I'm talking through evolution, and aren't getting anymore. Because evolution selected men for hard work. Like, you're talking these young guys, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, they were working hard since 8 years old. Like, guys entered the workforce, lifting and doing and being responsible for things at 10. Like, they were not waiting to 20 to enter the workforce. Nature selected men for their ability to work hard, build things. I have a list of what the major jobs were for most men. Farming, building, mining, soldiering, engineering, and accounting, and basically just generally being busy. And when I mean building and farming, you can take that as, or mining, okay? Mining can be going and working at Fort Mac, or it can be going down to the river 1,000 years ago and collecting rocks to build your foundation for your little hut, okay? So we've been doing that for a long time, and now, due to not prejudice, mechanization, and a multitude of factors that have reduced the amount of labor jobs, Joe jobs, that people could just walk out of grade 9 and get a job at a factory for 45 years and support a family on one income. Those jobs have been reduced a lot. So that's why some of these guys are having trouble finding meaning. Okay, so let's talk about what I had to read. So during first term, I'm reading all these books and doing all these things. So first book I read was Saving Normal in Walter's Abnormal Psych class, which I absolutely recommend you take. And it was about how, well, it's about a lot of things. It's mostly about the pharmaceutical industry, and part of it was about kids and the fact that if they can't be managed, they sometimes are drugged with prescription drugs to basically calm them down and make them more compliant. And I read Spark. Spark is a book about exercise and how it affects the mind, and there is lots of data on how physical arousal, so getting your heart rate up to just sub-maximal for 15 minutes or more, literally changes what's going on in your brain so that you can then go into the classroom or go and be more focused. So in that book, they say, if you have a test at 2 o'clock, at 1 o'clock, you shouldn't be studying, you should be working at it, because you're gonna be a faster thinker when you're physically around, or when you're just after them. I also read a book called The War Against Boys, which is by Christine Hoff-Summers, and it's really interesting and depressing, because you hear on one side all this stuff about how women are struggling, and then she's like, here's some data about how men are really falling off the edge. And so that's a book that inspired me. And I'll give you a little anecdote from that book. There was a teacher, and what that book taught me is to push the kids, because they'll say, oh, I can't do it. And if you push, they'll find that they can do it. So one little quick story about that is this teacher, her students were, and this is male and female students, they were not doing as well as they should have been doing. So she went in and found a file with their IQ numbers, right? So their IQ, and she's surprised. She's like, oh wow, these IQs, they're 105, 118, 110, 112, 120. Like, wow, those are above average IQs. So why aren't they doing so well? So you know what? I'm going to push them harder. I'm going to push, and really push them. And the class turned around when she realized that they could do so much more. She pushed them harder, and they did rise to the occasion. They absolutely rose to the occasion, and she was then acknowledged by her boss, her principal, who said, what's the deal? How are you finding so much success? I want to implement this all over. And she said, well, I have to admit, I went in and checked their IQ scores. And he said, those aren't their IQ scores, they're their locker numbers. Yeah. So even though it wasn't true, they rose to the occasion just by being pushed. So that's one thing I learned, is push, because they will reach the expectation. So I also read, and this is back, I think last summer, so it'll be 2018. And this is when Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life was going crazy. And the main message of that book is to find meaning through responsibility. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? You need to find responsibility, and you find meaning and happiness through taking on responsibility. So that plays into how I treat the kids. It's like, if there's something that needs to be done in the gym, we're the guys you come to first, because they are basically my slave workers. It's like, you need mats set up in the gym? I'll get my guys to set the mats up. And then I go to the guys and I say, there's a job to do, we're the ones who are doing it, and if we don't do it, the rest of the school will suffer. So when someone's being relied on, they will rise to the occasion. When they realize that they can contribute, which we don't do enough to kids. We don't demand enough of, you need to contribute today and every day. We let them, well, that's it, don't want to generalize. What's the word? Hyperbole? Okay. No hyperbole.
No.
Okay. I also read Caesar's Way. I read Caesar's Way a long time ago, and I love Caesar's Way. Do you know what Caesar's Way is? It's Caesar Milan, he's the dog whisperer. But the book isn't how to train dogs. I didn't take a book about how to train dogs and apply it to children, which you definitely can do. What I did was, because his book says, training people and rehabilitating dogs. That's what the book says, right on the cover. Caesar's Way, training people, rehabilitating dogs. So he teaches people. He's a teacher of people, just like me. So I said, okay, let's read this. And it's all about being a calm, assertive leader. Why is being calm important? Why is being assertive important? And how to lead a pack, really. And these bunch of kids, they're a pack. They're just a bunch of kids running around, following me around, doing my thing. Okay, so that was a good book, and then I did a lit review on the effect of exercise on memory. So memory is a big part of learning. Who can remember what PALS means? Anybody? Yes. Very good. So you learned that, and I can prove that because you remembered it. So memory and learning are intertwined. So I did that, and some of the results I found from that was exercise needs to be varied. It can't just be the same thing every day, because they can just basically go to sleep while they're exercising. And it should be, or it benefits the mind more, if it's interactive. like team sports. So running on the spot is less mentally stimulating than playing tennis, and playing tennis in pairs is more stimulating than just playing tennis with like one opponent. So that's one thing I learned, and a whole bunch of other stuff. There was a really great article on karate and how that contributed not only with physical but moral and all the mentorship that comes with it. Okay, because mentorship, I found that this, this isn't just a research project. I found that mentorship and relationship had so much more to do with this than I thought, and you can affect the kids, and they can become better, or they have potential to become better men with stable relationships with semi-stable men like myself. Okay, so now that I've read all that stuff, I need to put it into practice. So I designed a bunch of activities to work with the kids, because we're going half-hour sessions, 3 half-hour sessions a day with pairs, 3 pairs. So I wanted the activities to simulate work. I wanted, because 200 years ago, some 8-year-old was stacking something at work. So I'm like, his body, he was designed for that. He evolved to be able to do that. So I want to simulate something like that. And another thing I wanted to do was to help them learn how to regulate their excitement down to calm. Okay, so what we did was we would have something like skipping, which brings their physical arousal up, and they have high heart rates, they're sweating here. And then I had them get on a balance beam. So they had to bring themselves down. They had to train themselves to bring themselves down and get on the beam and walk across the beam. And then they would go and do this medicine ball thing, which was the one that trained them to be like work. That was the one that simulated work, because they take a medicine ball, and I put a line of tape and above their head. So they had to pick the medicine ball up, put it above the tape, let it drop, pick it up, put it above the tape, let it drop. So that was the activity, and that's draining, that's hard to do. And then after that, they would go from there and they'd pick up a dodgeball, like a really soft one. I could throw it at someone as hard as I could, and it wouldn't hurt. They're made for that. Yeah. Just randomly pick that. So I taped a little square on the wall so that they would do the medicine ball one and be tired and drained, and then they would have to focus themselves and bring themselves back down and then shoot. And we would keep score. And of course, I would say, we're not competing with each other. We're competing with our last score. So if you got 50 yesterday, just try to get 51 today. And of course, they are competing with each other. What did you get? What did you get? You cannot stop them. I tried, I said, we're not competing with each other. And they said, okay, fine. I totally agree. So you can't stop it. And it had to be difficult. It had to be hard. I had to push them. I wanted to push them past the line that they thought they could be pushed to. So I said, okay, 50 jumping jacks. And they would say, 50 jumping jacks? I can't do 50 jumping jacks. The number's so high, they can't imagine doing 50 of them. And then I said, okay, let's see how many you can do. And then they get to 30, and they're still going. And they get to 40, and then they get to 50, and they stop, and they say, I did it. And I said, yes, I know you did it. Don't tell me you can't do it, because I know you can do it. So don't tell me what you can't do. We will find out what you can't do. But don't tell me I can't do it. So they got used to the fact that I didn't want to hear what they can't do. So they would do it. And sometimes we would set a goal and they didn't reach it. And that's how life works. Sometimes you set goals that you don't reach. And learning that here is better than learning that here. Especially if males are more prone to suicide in their 20s. So I wanted it to be difficult. I wanted to push them as hard as they could be pushed, which is exactly what ended up happening. Okay, some of the learning goals were to push them and delayed gratification. So this one, especially one, but most of them, we would do circuit training, like what I just told you about, and also games like dodgeball, because I wanted it to be interactive. So we would play tennis, dodgeball, badminton, basketball, a lot of basketball, and other sports. And sometimes they always wanted to play dodgeball because they liked they liked roughhousing, and they liked, you know, throwing things at each other. And I know it's crazy to think that kids might like that, but they do. So they would say, especially one, he'd say, I want to play dodgeball. I want to play dodgeball. And I'm like, well, we don't play dodgeball every day, and we especially don't do it just because you want to do it. We've got a schedule, and today we play basketball. Today, tomorrow, we might play basketball, maybe. If we all follow instructions. I never said, if you don't do this, we won't play basketball. That's not my style. I just say, are you following instructions? And it's obvious they're not. And then they usually comply. Or if they don't, then you just do it. You don't tell them. You just say, we're not playing basketball. Or when tomorrow comes, it's like, we're not playing dodgeball. Why not? It's like, well, we're not very good at following instructions yesterday, so I don't feel like playing. Which showed that's the Caesar's way. That's assertion, being assertive. Like, I'm choosing what we do, not you guys. And then in the early days, because they try everything. Some of these kids had never heard the word no before. And they're all good kids. They're all really good. They might behave bad, but they are good. So one kid, he cried. And I wanted him to know that his tears would not change my decision. So I said, it's okay that you're crying. I'll wait. We can wait. But it's not going to change what we're doing or not doing. You don't decide with your tears what happens. And then he immediately stopped crying. When he knew that crying wasn't going to change the thing, he just stopped crying because he knew it was useless. So, and they were real tears. They were tears. It was water tears. Okay. The relationship that has had quite the impact on me and on them. They love it. They love the PALS program. When they're there, they don't always love it. And they say, oh, one kid quits every week. I'm quitting. I'm not doing this. This is the last day. I'm walking out of here today and never coming back. And then he runs in the next day, happy as he can be, every day, every time. So it's funny to see how the kids work like that. But the relationship is super strong. And I know, because I've interacted with their teachers, and I know that having a man in their lives that they respect and admire and want to be around does change their behavior in class. Just seeing calm people doing things, being assertive, being a leader, telling them no, telling them yes, they benefited from that. So I've had several meetings with their teachers, and the one kid who's never heard no before, he's getting better at hearing no. And this other kid, he's more calm, and the other kid who, he was a bit mouthy, he's less mouthy. But not across the board, but not cured. Just a little bit of influence goes a long way. So what kind of kids did we have in this PALS program? We had kids, here it is. Okay, so we tried to get some kids who were a little overweight, just to see if we can get them moving and get them liking moving. We got kids that were hyperactive, which they were enough to draw from. We generally tried to get some kids with bad attitudes and also with less than optimal father figure around. So it's not that there's no dad, it just might be that he's not around as much as possible, or he's not around at all, or whatever. I don't know. I don't know anything about these kids other than basic things. I didn't read their file. I don't know what kind of autism this one kid has. I just know that he has, struggles with certain things in that area. I don't want to know too much because it doesn't matter. You get the kid who comes through the door. You don't get some file. So those were the kinds of kids that we got. So what else? What else can I tell you? Oh, right. So learning spatial awareness with the kids. We would chase them with the dog. I would chase them with the dog, right? Because in 12 Rules for Life, which is a good book, and I know Jordan Peterson's a controversial guy, but there is good stuff in there, whether you agree with them or not. There is valuable stuff as a parent or as just a person walking around that you can benefit from. And he advocates rough and tumble play for the boys, and probably for girls, but he really talks about it with the boys. And I'm like, obviously, hands off. Like that's the rules. I'm fully aware of the rules in education, but dodgeball was a bridge. We could have rough and tumble play without actually having physical contact. And yeah, you can pat them on the back and give them a little hair scrub, but that's it. Anyway, so dodgeball. That would be their little treat, and if they would do their circuits and if we were following instructions, then dodgeball was the treat that they got. And they would learn spatially and about their bodies, because they're growing and they really are just learning about themselves, and they sit down too much, so they can benefit from running around a lot. So we have this thing in the middle, so we run around and we throw things at each other. And this one kid, one time, he was running around so hard that he overdid it. He just went over. And the question I have to you, so as I'm chasing him, and he's taking the corner so hard that he just totally rolls out and bails, did I throw the ball at him or not? Yes.
Oh, you definitely did.
I absolutely pegged him. Absolutely pegged him. Overdoing it has consequences. So that's how you learn. If some wolf is chasing you and you go over, he's not going to say, "Are you okay?" But you got to remember, those are the things that his body evolved to be taught at that age. Now it's different. I have to see what time we're at because I'm overdoing it. I think it's time. Okay, I got just a couple of minutes. Okay, so I just need to make two little mentions. The United Way. The United Way is worthy of your attention. They look beyond gender to help people who need help. Because I went on a lot of websites to see the categories of people that they're looking at helping, and it's Indigenous, women's rights, and food scarcity, refugees, water. So I looked at these things and I said, where am I going to click on to apply? Am I going to click on women's rights? Because that's the closest thing. And there was nothing. So when you look at these companies or foundations to get stuff, to engage with and get them to try to help you help other people, look at who they're wanting to help. Are they looking to help select few, or are they looking to help as many people as possible? And are they open to new ideas? So the United Way was the one that was open to this new idea. And it's not new, by the way. It's been done in other places. It's just adapted here. So they are someone you should always think highly of, because they made this possible. They made a very generous donation that got me paid every day. And it also paid for some gear that we're going to get. And the snow has really, I'm like, oh, just go outside, it's no problem. No, it's cold, and it's snowy, and it's harsh, and we weren't able to go outside as much. I had a plan. Part of the playbook was dog training. So get the dog in. We have a dog who we can bring in, not Sandy. We got that dog. So we're outside. We got an obstacle course for the dog, and we were ready to do it. And we start going. And we're trying to run him around. The owner of the dog is the gym teacher, Miss Fox, and she said, "Yeah, if you guys start running around the course, he'll follow you and do that." So I said, "Are you ready, guys? We're gonna go." Okay. So then we go, and the dog just looks at us, and he just turns while looking, and then walks the other way back to where he knows his owner is, Miss Fox. But it was hilarious, just the contempt that dog had for us. No, but the plan is, once this stuff starts to melt, because it continues, I'm going to go on and do this until the end of June. And the dog will be a part of it, Brinkley, a very cute little dog. So, so that will be the future, is we're going to get outside more and run around and do stuff like that, get the dog involved, because then that will give them the ability to lead. That's what I really wanted. I said, you need to be calm and assertive leaders if you're going to make this dog go around the thing, and they have to look at you and see. They can't see frustration. If the dog sees frustration, you're going to lose. You need to be calm. So that first one didn't work out, but hey, it doesn't work out sometimes, and you can learn and do it again, especially after the the snow melts, which. Okay. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks.
Valuable time. So we have a little bit of time for questions.
Peter.
Okay, so I might have missed about a minute of Lois's introduction, so maybe maybe she said this already.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to know, how did you make the connection with the school in
Right,
Newtown?
okay.
And how many students exactly did you work with, and what were their ages?
Okay, so originally, so when I put my proposal and all the ideas together, it was, okay, let's do this, let's go to St. Stephen's Elementary, because I can walk there, or it's closer, like why not go there, why not go to the Milltown, or St. Stephen's Middle School, wherever. And then the connection was, Lois said, I know Heather Bell Williams at Milltown Elementary through the church, and that's what a lot of people forget, is that the church is a fabulous network. It's a business network. Like, it's not just going and worshiping, it's a community. And that's a great way to, it's a great way to make connections that, like, just like this one, I was like, I need now a school to go to. What's gonna be the path of least resistance to get this stuff going? And we got in my car and drove right to Heather's office and sat with her, and she loved it, and she said, oh, I've got a list of boys that you can work with as long as you are. So who were they? They are 3 sets of 2, and they are 8 to 10.
Okay.
And Heather chose them, not you?
Heather chose them. Yeah, I didn't really know them that well. In order to get on the supply teachers list, which is that was another part that I had to do. It's like, you got to get the ability to go into schools and take responsibility for kids. And I can do that in Ontario, and I can do that in England. I'm certified to do it in Australia and Thailand, but not New Brunswick. So I had to do that. So that's a whole step that I had to do, and that's who they were. By the way, Heather Bell Williams at Milltown, she has a reputation for being very progressive, try new things. She has programs over there that are unbelievable. And if you are blessed enough to work with her, or to get the opportunity to be influenced by her, you jump all over it. She is brilliant. She's one of the most brilliant educators I've had the pleasure of working for. And she is good at keeping everybody on the same page, accountable, how's it going, what's the limits, what's the this. So, but she does it with this grace that is really beautiful. So if you can find your way to being influenced by Heather Bell Williams, I absolutely recommend it. She's the best in town, for sure. So, thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Walter.
I know you were being ethically cautious and not actually, studying the kids.
Studying, getting results.
Nevertheless,
Yeah, what are my results?
yeah, did you hear from teachers anything
Yes.
about the educational difference,
Yes, okay, so I had interviews in the same way that a teacher would go to another teacher and talk to them. So not in a scientific way, I just said, have you noticed any difference? Have you noticed this? Have you noticed that? And I would ask specific questions, and each one of the kids, she said, oh, he's become more respectful. He doesn't say this or say that anymore. And I'm like, okay, that's a step. It might not be from just me. Like, this is a big world, and he's got a long day. 30 minutes with me might not be the thing that made him do that. And another one, the teacher reported that he was more calm. He says he comes back and he's calm, and he's able to sit and do his stuff. But that particular student was academically inclined. He was good at math, and he was good at English, and he wasn't struggling academically, but she did notice that he came back and was much more able to sit and chill out and, just not be so excited all the time. And the one kid who had never, in my personal opinion, never heard the word no, he's getting, the teacher reported that he's a lot better at hearing that he's not gonna get what he wanted. And the other thing that I heard from all the teachers was that the effect is limited. It does not last all day. It lasts far too short a time. So the book Spark, which was the one that said, let's take all the kids off drugs and put them on exercise literally as a pill substitute. And the same thing for depression and anxiety. He's like, let's just switch it with exercise, because that is how it works. And although they're absolutely right, there is a limit. Like half an hour workout will affect you for about 45 minutes. So it's not like it lasts all day. That was what I learned from the teachers. And that was kind of disappointing. I was like, man, I was really hoping that this would be some kind of miracle that just lasted all day. But it wasn't. So I would say, I'll get to you in just 1 second. I would say that if I were to give a recommendation from this non-research project, it would be that the schools have a kind of a change in, let's say every hour you have 15 minutes of exercise. Every single hour you have 15 minutes of exercise. So they know, that'll take 1 week to get them used to that. Say, you just get a little bell that goes off every hour. It's like, oh, the bell goes off. Okay, because they're little kids, they get excited. And then you can say, okay, this time we're gonna run this spot, let's go, 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 go. And if they do that, and then they go to the next thing and the next little station and they switch it up, and maybe it's interactive, you get some stuff and you throw them back and forth. If they did that every single hour, in my personal opinion, from this research, not research, then it would be the most beneficial way to integrate what I've learned. Peter?
You just answered my question. I was just thinking, is it possible to imagine a different model of
Yes.
school day where you do it multiple times?
If I were to just make a school right now, and this is what I'm about to say is based on the books that I read, not what I'm observing, is that I would personally, as an educator, have separate classrooms for a lot of things. Boys, girls. Not everything, some things, probably most things. And I would do exercise every 15 minutes, for sure. There would be a certain amount of, what I guess segregation is probably the accurate word, of boys and girls in, let's say, math and this, and then, drama or gym or whatever. Get them all together, get them socializing, get them learning how to deal with girls and boys and just girls and all mixed. So that's how I would invent my new school, which would be to do that and have regular exercise. Yes, sir.
One last question for me. Was it a significant amount of pay that you received from this? How did it relate in some manageable way to your tuition
Yes.
in your program?
Okay, so the way the pay worked was and this was Mark and I, because I'm like, how about this? And so this is a back and forth between friends. This is, Mark's got some experience in this, but this is him and I over drinks saying what's reasonable, what's unreasonable, and let's find out the sweet spot. And the sweet spot was $20 an hour, so that's $50 a day, 5 days a week, $250 a week, times I don't know how many weeks, but it's $6,000. So I get personally $6,000, and the United Way donated 10, so $4,000 for gear. And I think most of the gear, I'm finding myself to be very cheap with the amount of money, because it has to be spent. It's gonna all be spent, so that's not a problem. And $6,000 will go to my wage, and $4,000 will go to stuff. And I built that beam out of 2x4s, and I built some other things. And originally I was gonna get an Xbox, and we were gonna project it onto the thing and do Dance Dance Revolution. And I was like, well, dancing, fantastic, let's do dancing. And then in my reading, I'm like, first of all, they don't need more screen time. Screen time is done. So forget that is scratched. And also, it's not as interactive as it would be otherwise. So we did dance, you better believe that. We had dance-offs, and we had dancing competitions, but they would be dancing on the beam. So I put them on this beam, and I'd say, okay, we're all gonna dance. I'm not on the beam, because so we would do, and I'm just diverging from your question a bit, but yeah, I had to find other ways. But with the pay, the $6,000 will pay for all of my classes this term.
It's brilliant.
So the work I did this term paid for the entire term, not including my rent. But I would have to pay rent if I wasn't at school, and it didn't pay for my food if, you know, you gotta eat, no matter where you are.
I just wanted to ask that question because I wanted other students to salivate.
Right, so let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about spreading this around. I don't know if this is still a thing, but the community engagement thing, I recommend it because I found so much meaning in this thing. It was, why am I getting up at 6:45 every morning in freezing snow, freezing cold to scrape my car off to go and do this job? Because if I didn't, these kids would be crushed. I was sick one day and they let me know how they felt about my absence. They were not happy. And that was one of the things that the teacher reported was they love it. They look forward to this all day long and they come back with big smiles, and when the time we weren't there, they were crushed. Yes, Renata.
So kind of in that vein, before for starters, great work, and I've absolutely loved hearing about it all year, all semester long. Every lunch, you hear about these kids? Yeah, it's been really great.
Yeah.
Anyway, so come June,
Yeah.
you know, what happens to these relationships? What happens to these kids? Like, do you see them ever again? Like, and then what effect do you think that might have?
Okay,
if
so
you
let's
never
talk
see
about
them
the
again?
future. Thanks for the question. The future. I will go until June, and I'm sure that the relationship will have an exponential effect in that I won't just be, because I have another half to go. Like, I still have twice as long to go. So it won't be just double as close. Like, it's gonna be, we're tight already. And I can only imagine us playing outside with a dog, how that's gonna bring us together. So I'm not sure. What I would like to do is to pass this on to a senior male student next year. But I don't know. It'll be much more difficult for someone without my training, my education, and licensing. Like, I have lots of experience in dealing with kids and training, and I can legally go and take responsibility for kids. And I'm not sure if someone like Jake can do that. I'm sure he could do it, but whether the government would allow him to do it is a completely different story. And it would be a lot of work, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. You want to do the work, you can do the work, and you can get kind of what they call a local license. So if you're not completely like accredited, or not accredited, certified, then you can go in uncertified, but it's like you get paid less and all that stuff. But if you're dealing with the United Way, you negotiate with them what you get paid.
And let's say you can't get anyone to kind of take the baton from you. What do you think? Like, do you think there will be any sustained effect in the kids, like over the summer, the next school year? Like, they're not exercising, let's say. Like, do you think there's going to be any
Regression?
Yeah, possibly.
I don't know. I do think that some of the learning, the boundaries that they've learned about yes and no and how far, I think that they're permanent. I think that having that influence for 6 whole months, every single weekday, so it's not like once a week, it's every day. I think it will have a lasting effect. Will they remember my name in 20 years? No. But I do think that they'll have a little piece of me for the whole time. Yes, Sarah.
Great job.
Thank you.
It's great to see how excited you've been, and yeah, just such a neat intersection of your passions and like grab the bull by the horns kind of approach. But my question is, in terms of what you are doing with them, are you really just kind of like focused on the activities, or are you doing any kind of like scenarios or conversations with them about like how this applies in the classroom, or when they go home? Like, are you kind of like, it seems like you're fully informed on how you hope this will affect them in the classroom, how you hope it would translate. You didn't really talk about it, maybe like even into their home life or things like that, but are you just sort of hoping that will be a spin-off?
No, we have had those conversations. So when we're doing the skipping and then the balancing on the beam, I say, you need to use this principle. Like I'm speaking directly about using this in the class. I said, so when the teacher says calm down, you need to, do your work. Use this skill that you're learning right now then. And if your mom says do this, and you're all excited, and to stop running around and doing crazy things, use this skill. This is what the skill is about. So yes, it was explicit how to utilize this skill that I was trying to give them. It was very clear that it can be applied. And also, talking about not just exercise, but mentorship. Like I went into the teacher one day and I said, how's it going? Anything? And she's like, yeah, well, can you talk to him about this topic? This thing that he's having trouble with, and I'd like him to hear it from you. So I went in and we're just taking the medicine ball, throwing it back and forth. How's it going, pal? And doing this and that. And then I would make up some nonsense story about myself that was a direct analogy to what I was supposed to be telling him. So I said, oh, this is how I dealt with it. And, it worked out that way. And he's like, oh, okay. So, and sometimes I'd be like, if you're in class, you don't take somebody's thing because that's how it works. You don't take people's stuff. So yes, there was a lot of direct mentorship and guidance outside of not only the PALS program, not only the classroom, but into the home and into the future workplace. We talk about the workplace, like they're this big, and I'm talking to them about their careers and what to do for a living, and they don't know. They have no idea what they want to do. Probably because the jobs that they'll get don't exist right now. So yeah.
I just wanted to say on that, I think it's such a great combination of investing in the agency that kids have, because they do have agency and we don't always treat them like they have agency, but also to undergird that with integrity, to say like I love that you're talking about responsibility so much, that it's like you have agency and you get to make decisions, but so many times it's like you have agency but also we hold all the power.
Exactly.
It's kind of like you can have agency but also what's the integrity you're bringing behind it. So
Yeah, giving them the ability to choose kind of what they're going to do, because if they follow instructions, I play ball.
Yeah.
And if they don't follow instructions, then I don't play ball. Literally and figuratively. So yes, giving them that control and knowing that their actions have consequences and that they can behave in a certain way that they will see direct benefits in that way. So another way this can be applied, not just through exercise, but imagine this. Let me just put this into the world. I got a crazy idea, Lois, which is what I come to.
Time for another one.
Yeah. Okay, so imagine this. The school, all the English teachers, or all the English students, history students, IS students, philosophy students, they all go into this program, hopefully somehow funded, where they get paid, or their tuition subsidized. And they read to a kid for half an hour a day, but they read to 3 kids for half an hour a day, just like me. I had 3 sessions of half an hour. And they do that with the same set of kids, so that's 3 kids, every day for 4 straight years. The relationship, these kids sometimes they don't have a lot of money at home. They don't have a lot of people who they can look to for that kind of influence. But imagine the relationship after 4 years of reading to the same kid, how many books, how many adventures you would go on through literature for 4 full years. And the SSU student, I can't even begin to tell you the growth for me. Can't even begin. But I think 4 years of that strong relationship with a stable young adult that they like and probably over those years come to love. And they see ambition. They see a person who's working for a living and they say, I want to work for a living and I want to achieve things. Because I'm always talking about achievement and doing things. And I think that I can see that they also are becoming a little more ambitious in regards to what they want to do. But they could just be telling me what I want to hear. Who knows? Lois.
Could you explain quickly? I know it wasn't part of your project, but how it expanded to Milltown or to St. Stephen Middle School.
Okay, so I'm over here doing Milltown, and someone calls me on the phone and says, hey, Brandon, you're the guy who deals with these troubled kids, right? And I'm like, yep, that's me. You've been correctly informed. They say Derek O'Brien, who's the head of schools in Charlotte County, he gave me your number, and we've got some kids over here that need influence like you. So I'm like, okay, this is the rate, and it's government money. Like they said, we pay this, so it's government dollars. The United Way doesn't pay for this. This is just an extension where they now hire me to go, because I'm crazy. I go from Milltown, so 7:30 to 10 is Milltown, 10 to 2:30 is at St. Stephen's Middle School. So there is not a shred of daylight between my two shifts, and I somehow have to teleport to one place to the other. But now I'm over there, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's, they're kids and we can't really talk too much about it. But they are trouble, and they need someone like me to help them get through their year so that they can get to the next year. So that tripled my wage. So just overnight, it tripled. So now, but I'm working myself ragged. I don't know if you see me coming through here. I come in here, so I go, because I said, under no circumstance am I missing lunch, SSU. All right, that's non-negotiable. So I go from there, from Middletown to St. Stephen's Middle School, and then 12 o'clock, I'm peeling out of the driveway and ripping into this parking lot, coming in here, scarfing down an entire lunch in 20 minutes, and then how's it going, and then plate in the dishwasher and back to St. Stephen Middle School by 12:25. So it is lightning. And then and then I'm helping these kids get their math, English, science. So I need to I'm literally a teacher teaching math, science, and English. So I was like, oh man, I'm gonna get this to be a work ed thing. This is PALS program. And I tried. And the situation was too delicate for me to push it. Because I was like, hey guys, at university I'm studying how exercise affects the brain and the mind and learning. And it's proven that exercise enhances cognitive function. Do you want to work at it every day with me? I've got permission from the people who called me to implement put a work at bike, a cycle, stationary bike in the thing. And they weren't into it. If it weren't that situation, I would have pushed it. I would have said, it's mandatory. But that was not my place, and I didn't want them to disengage. I needed them, this was like last straw kind of thing, so we needed them on board and not associating me with that jerk who puts them on the bike, right? So, wanted to do the exercise, couldn't do it, but now, okay, so let's talk about how that's gonna affect me. Derek and I, and Heather Bell Williams, and I'm meeting everybody at the board. Like I have a network of people at the board that I know, and I'm intending to continue working there. I'm hoping that this will move me into a full-time teaching job in September, and I'll set up here for the rest of my life and maybe meet some young lady and have some children. And a dog. And a dog. A couple cats. Yeah. So, that's the influence that it's had. Sometimes I couldn't tell the difference, literally couldn't tell the difference between school, work, and my part-time job, which is the PALS program. So I couldn't tell the difference between my school at SSU, the work that I was doing part-time, and my career education work. I was sending emails and going to meetings, and I'm like, is this a school meeting? Is this an SSU meeting? Is this a Milltown meeting? Is this a Brandon the teacher meeting? And it was all three at once, and it was sometimes none, and it was a wild, wild ride that can only happen at SSU. This cannot happen anywhere else. Where else? I'm not kidding. How else? Like, you're at lunch at SSU with the professor of this, the president, and some guest who happens to be a major pillar in society at the school, and you're all just talking and you're connecting, and through their churches and the church over there and all their networks. I really don't think it could have been done anywhere else, and that's why part of the reason I love it here, because you can get as much as you're willing to put in. If you want to coast through it, and some people do, they're not going to get as much as they can, but if you go absolutely ape, you can get unbelievable results that you wake up in the morning and you can't believe it. Like, the song, You Got a Friend in Me, by, who's that by? Anybody? Anyway, it's an old song. Anyway, that's the song they use. Pardon me?
Nielsen?
I think so, I don't know. But you all know the one, it's from Toy Story?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's from before Toy Story. It's in Toy Story. They play that as the bell in Milltown. So I'll be playing with the kids to this song that comes on every day, and it's "You Got a Friend in Me." And we're going, and it's like I'm in some kind of like montage where I'm chanting this song, and it's like the cutest thing in the world. And you can't believe it. And I don't think that could have been possible without the relationships that I've built with the faculty and the staff and the students and their relationships in the community. Couldn't have been done, I don't think. And I think that's probably it for time. I'm willing to take on more, but it's 3, so that's the
That's a good place to end.
Yeah.